I will describe in detail the 18th verse of Chapter 1, Pratopadesh, Rasmarana, of Rasaratnakara Rasayankhand. Now, to understand exactly what that means, welcome to this explainer. We're decoding the absolutely fascinating world of ancient Eastern medicinal chemistry today. We are stepping way back in time to explore an incredible monument of Indian alchemical and Ayurvedic tradition. We'll be looking at how ancient practitioners combined intense metallurgy, super strict dietary regimens, and deep philosophy in this ultimate quest for health and longevity. It is quite the journey, so let's get into it. Okay, here's our roadmap for today. First, discovering the Rasaratnakara itself. Number 2, we'll cover the science of rejuvenation. 3, we are looking at the master metal, mercury. 4, we'll break down the ancient alchemical processes. And finally, 5, the lasting legacy of Indian alchemy. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Discovering the Rasaratnakara. To really ground ourselves in the primary source material, take a look at this title page. It's from a 1939 printing of the Rasayankhand, which is basically the fourth part of a much larger, massive text known as the Rasaratnakara, originally authored by Sri Nityanatha Siddha. This is a monumental text, guys. It essentially bridges the gap between mystical, spiritual alchemy and what we'd recognize today as structured clinical pharmacology.
Now, this specific edition was printed by the Video Vilas Press right in Benares City back in 1939. And that represents a really critical era. It was a time when these ancient Sanskrit manuscripts were being meticulously compiled, edited, and printed in early 20th century India just to preserve them for future generations. Benares, or Varanasi, has literally been a hub of traditional learning for centuries, so it makes total sense that this printed edition was born there.
Moving right along to Section 2, the science of rejuvenation. So, the crucial thing we need to understand here is the term Rasayana. What is it? Well, it's an ancient branch of Ayurvedic medicine that is wholly dedicated to rejuvenation, life extension, and anti-aging therapies. We're not talking about popping a pill to cure a temporary headache here. The goal was to fundamentally transform the body at a cellular level, creating immense vitality and almost impenetrable immunity against disease. And this wasn't just some abstract pie-in-the-sky philosophy. It was a highly categorized science. Just look at the ambitious medical goals of some of the specific formulations listed in the text. We have Divyakachari Fatika, which aimed for divine rejuvenation. Then there's Amritanava Rasa, targeting the eradication of all disease. And my personal favorite, Vajra Sundari, which actually translates to attaining a diamond-like, indestructible body. I mean, no way, right? But these were complex, carefully formulated medicines designed to absolutely push the limits of human biology. What's truly astounding to me is the sheer volume of these recipes. If you look at these thematic index pages, they list hundreds of meticulous formulations. The organization here is just incredible. It shows a highly developed system of plant and mineral compounds, all perfectly categorized by their specific therapeutic effects. Honestly, it's like an ancient pharmacological database. Which brings us to Section 3, the master metal, mercury. Now, in the tradition of Rasa Shastra, which is the science of alchemy, absolutely no substance is more revered or more dangerous, frankly, than parada, or mercury. It is considered the supreme alchemical element. But of course, these ancient chemists knew perfectly well that it was highly toxic in its raw form. Because of that, it required incredibly intense, multi-step purification before it could ever be used medicinally. Looking at this dense block of Sanskrit text, you'll find a staggering amount of it dedicated solely to a process called parada marana. Now, that literally translates to killing the mercury, but in an alchemical context, killing it means stripping the metal of its toxic, volatile nature and transforming it into a bioavailable, therapeutic ash or compound that the human body can actually use. Just to give you an idea of the extreme precision we are talking about here, the text outlines no fewer than 11 distinct methods just for processing this one volatile metal. They used everything from herbal juices to intense heat to bind and purify the mercury, recognizing that tweaking the preparation yielded completely different medicinal properties. It's a real masterclass in trial and error. Let's transition over to Section 4, Ancient Alchemical Processes. Okay, here is where we get into the really meticulous details of that 18th verse I mentioned at the very beginning. The text lays out incredibly strict contraindications before processing these metals. Specifically, they had to avoid day sleep, night waking, and heavy cooling foods like the Karktafala melon. You might be wondering, why? Well, this kind of therapy required immense metabolic fire, or Agni, and a state of complete mental purification. But what's absolutely fascinating is how modern science validates this today. The instruction to avoid night waking aligns perfectly with modern chronobiology. We now know that the brain's glymphatic system clears metabolic waste during deep nighttime sleep, right? And staying awake at night spikes cortisol, heavily stressing the endocrine system. So these ancient prerequisites weren't just arbitrary rules. They were precise neurobiological requirements for cellular healing and avoiding cortisol overload. Alongside those super strict dietary rules, the physical chemistry itself required immense labor. First, they'd combine raw materials. Then they would vigorously grind the mixture in a heavy stone mortar, known as a kalva, sometimes for days on end. Next, the whole mixture was sealed tight in clay crucibles and subjected to intense, carefully measured heat using specialized apparatuses, like a sand bath, which they called a Valuka yantra. This transformative fire was heavily symbolic in their philosophy, for sure, but it was also scientifically vital to extract that purified, non-toxic essence. And the consistency of these methods across centuries is just remarkable. This earlier 1913 edition displays the exact same crucible and heat processing methodologies. This proves that these weren't just passing fads or random experiments. They were rigorously standardized, peer-reviewed procedures that were systematically passed down and verified across generations of practitioners. Finally, let's explore Section 5, the legacy of Indian alchemy. The Rasaratnakara beautifully illustrates the dual approach of ancient Ayurvedic pharmacology. On one hand, you have organic materials, things like roots, herbs, and leaves, which were used for gentle, gradual healing. But then, on the flip side, you have inorganic materials, these highly processed metals and minerals we've been talking about, used for incredibly potent, aggressive, and transformative therapy targeted at severe or deeply rooted diseases. So what you should really take away from this is that this text represents a major leap in early scientific thought. We're seeing the methodical categorization of complex recipes, incredibly advanced multi-step mineral purification techniques, and a very clear historical transition from purely spiritual alchemy into a highly structured, observable, and reproducible system of pharmacology. It really leaves us with a compelling question. How much of modern pharmacology owes its roots to the rigorous chemistry of these ancient alchemists? There are definitely topics here that warrant further modern research. On behalf of the Vedmata AI family, it is our humble request that if you found our presentation informative, please share our video as widely as possible so that the authentic knowledge of Indian Vedic texts can reach the masses. Come, let us all participate in this yagya of knowledge. Har Har Mahadev.